What if one conversation could change the way you see yourself and the world? Welcome to My Wellness Spring, where we bring you inspiring people with practical wisdom to help you live a healthier, happier, and more meaningful life. Today, I'm delighted to chat with the wonderful Simona Fălticeanu, a psychologist, meditation teacher, Ayurvedic practitioner, and a lifelong student of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. At a time when people are seeking calm, connection, and purpose, Simona shares simple yet powerful insights to help us evolve mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So whether you're looking to reduce stress, find clarity, or simply feel more like yourself, stay tuned. This inspiring conversation is for you. Welcome, Simona, to Wellness Spring. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me on your show, Beverley.
It's an absolute pleasure. And for the listeners, Simona and I met many moons ago back in Monaco with a lovely communal friend. And she came to my Be Here Now ladies lunch, and she did a wonderful speech and well received. And it's been a while. We've been planning to do something special, and we will do some retreats together eventually. But for today, here's a great start. So, like myself, Simona is a nomad. She's a traveler, a global person of the world. So you grew up in Romania and now you live in Turkey. What or who inspired you to become a psychologist and later explore Ayurveda and ancient healing traditions?
Thank you for the relevant question, Beverley. First and foremost, I think we're not nomads by choice. We are nomads because maybe this is the path we have to follow to get to our truths. Some people find their answers just sitting at home. They don't have to go from one end to the other of the world. But yes, it's very interesting. I never felt at home in Romania where I was born. Even in favorable circumstances, I just felt like I didn't fit in, and I was getting more and more and more depressed, despite the, let's say, following the rules and, graduating. Actually, my first degree is in languages. I studied Italian and Serbo-Croatian in my first degree in university. And I got I followed the steps. I respected my parents. I did what they wanted me to do. I got a very good job. Actually, I couldn't have gotten, a better job at the time. I was working for Canadian Embassy, the Canadian Foreign Affairs in Bucharest. And it was a very prestigious job, but I was getting more and more and more depressed because I didn't feel there was no coherence or resonance between my heart and my brain. When you are, I think, all mental disease comes when you're meant to do something else, but you're just stuck in that job and doing that, 9 to 5 for money. And because it was such a good job, there was, so much fear of letting go. I was thinking, if I let go of this job, actually, I had this epiphany and I have to talk about it. It was 9:30 in the morning, one summer morning. I had just returned from a trip to Turkey, which I greatly enjoyed. But the way I travel places is I like to sit with local people. I'm not a big tourism fan. So I like to just observe what people do, how they behave, interactions, culture, tradition, like unexplored places. So I felt like there is something in Turkey that I really that really resonates with me, and I would like to go deeper. But I had only 11-day holidays a year, according to the Canadian government, standard. 11 days out of 365 is very little. So I came back and I was already very, not depressed, but, we live in this world of duality. And if there is a problem, automatically there must be a solution. Take it from, quantum physics, take it from everything, right? There is big because there is small. There is, I don't know, like fast because there is slow. So I always think there must be a solution, and it's up to me to find it. I have to apply myself to find that solution. So I was sitting at my desk and I was just making myself a cup of coffee at 9:30 in the morning. Comfortable desk, Canadian embassy, good pay, diplomatic environment. What else could anybody want at 22 years old or 23? And I just had a view of my life. I thought, wait a minute, until I'm 65, I'm going to be in this chair for the rest of my life, and I'm going to stir my coffee at 9:30 in the morning, and probably maybe, get married, have a child. We had a colleague who she had just had a baby, and she was constantly running back and forth with bags of food and serving her husband. They were both working with us. And I thought, do I really want this? And then at the same time, there were people coming who were taking sabbaticals, from Canada. And I thought that would be really nice to be able to not work for 1 year and do, follow the things that we want to do. So that was my first, how can I say, the first big dissonance and the first impulse for me to start on my journey. And it took a lot of courage and a lot of desperation, actually.
Well, I can understand that, because I was the only one out of 6 that went overseas to live, and I never felt like Wales was where I was meant to be. And even when I was first born, it was like, why am I with this family? I really didn't feel like I belonged. And it's interesting you said that you felt depressed, because a lot of people do feel depressed when they do things to please their parents. And you went down that avenue first, and then you had the epiphany and the courage to give up your very well paid job and career and follow your heart. And you talked about, the state of people today, with emotions. It's a big thing. It's trending about the emotional state and how do we find that nervous system regulation. So in your humble opinion, what is the foundation of well-being?
I think actually just to go a little bit forward, I moved from there. I quit my job and I went to Canada, and it's in itself is a very interesting story. But once I arrived in Canada, I found myself a good job, and I was financially doing very well, but still the dissonance was there. So, I realized that just changing the place doesn't automatically solve all the problems. So I did change the place. I did have the confidence. I did gain the confidence that, yes, I can be successful, in another place, in a totally different environment where nobody was there to help me. But still how can I say, this dissonance, cognitive dissonance was there. So I thought, I'm again in a well-paid job. I was working for Accenture at the time. It was Anderson Consulting. And I just quit my job again, and I went back to school. I actually worked for 4 years and studied at night. So I was doing 9 to 5 job and 6 to 9 work. And it was, Canada, Ottawa, especially where I was incredibly cold. So, but I had this, I could go through my 9 to 5 because there was something I looked forward to. And that was mainly understanding myself and understanding, why this depression, like why everybody was saying, you have enough money, you have, your boyfriend is a doctor. What's the problem? Why are you unhappy? Like, why do you have such high standards? Why can't you be happy? And I'm just trying to ask myself the same question and find an answer for it. And unfortunately, I don't think, talking to people, talking to professionals may help, but the only person who can do the real understanding is you. So I pushed forward and I graduated in 2001. And there was this desire. I had to give up my job in the last year because the past grades were very high. I had to have over 80% to pass all the exams, so nothing under 80. And I had to quit my job. And then, I went back to counting the pennies and sharing with the roommate. And then I really wanted a holiday. So I found this working holiday program. And I thought, let me look at the list of countries. And I saw South Africa. And I talked to my South African friends and they said, forget about it, not for you. It's, and for the one time in my life that I listened to somebody's advice. And then the second country on the list was Japan, and I thought, oh, wow, that would be different. There'd be stuff to learn there. And so I signed up, I sent my passport and I totally forgot about it. And two months later, I'm looking for my passport thinking, where did I put it? And then I get this message from the Japanese consulate saying your visa is ready. And at the time I had maybe, very little money in my bank account. And I thought, if I can borrow money from somebody, then I will go. If I don't, then I won't go. And it was just like, I leave it up to God. And sure enough, I got a lot of offer for support. And I thought, okay, here I come, Japan. I went there without understanding, speaking, any preparation whatsoever. I just jumped in. And Japan was, I think, the first place where I thought, I kind of fit in. It feels more familiar than Europe, and it feels more familiar than Canada. And I started looking into Japanese traditions and because once you go to such a different society, you start questioning, what is right and what is wrong. My mom always told me, it's proper to eat this way and you shouldn't slurp or make noise or, behave in particular ways to be, a good member of society in Europe. But everything was reversed in Japan. So then it makes you question what is correct, what is real, what is good, what is true. And from there, I'll just leave it to you.
And your mother, what nationality were your parents? And have you got other siblings? Just so we can have a feel about you, because obviously family have played a big role in your life.
Yes, I have to say my mother was Romanian. We have roots. My mother's family was from the southeast of Romania, where the Bulgarian border, the Danube, flows, and they were of Greek origin. And I did not know my father, my biological father. I grew up with a Romanian Italian father, and I ended up being adopted by a family in India. And that's the father I call my father, because he was really, it was like, I would say, coming home. When I finally made it to India, it's like these people are there waiting for me, and they are there to show me and to demonstrate some things that, to answer questions that I had. And I remember I was about 30 years old when I moved to India. I was recommended and basically handed over to this family by my Tibetan teacher in Japan. And they, normally a woman needs to have somebody's wing over her. And she asked them, if it would be okay if they looked after me. And then, at 30, I found myself telling somebody, or like, my Indian father telling me, oh, you should be home by 9 o'clock, and, make sure you don't talk to men, or, you behave in a particular way. And I thought, who are you to tell me? But then we are not used to this level of care. And in Europe, and I think in the West, it's, the closer you are to your family, the more of a loser you're considered, like, oh, you're 40 and you still live with your mother and father, it's a sign of weakness. Whereas, in Turkey, in Asia in general, family is a unit of strength. So that was, the first step of me understanding what happiness is, because it's almost like your soul travels, through a journey to understand which pieces are missing. And when I arrived in Asia, I'm not saying the West doesn't have amazing culture and, things to be learned from there, but the missing things that I did not have, I found in Asia. And I found respect, which is slowly dying away. In our cultures, respect for the elderly, respect for, teachers, etc. I found amazing bonds. I found amazing forgiveness. I found that it's okay to have an argument with your family member and you can make up and just, forget about it and not hold a grudge. As a psychologist, also, we had this training, the Freudian classical, blame your mother and your father for your, everything you failed in life. And how many cases there are of children who don't talk to their parents anymore because the psychologist said that they've damaged you and they've done harm to you, So looking at this, seeing, for example, when you're going to the mall in India, you see a lot of families going with their elderly in wheelchairs. The elderly don't stay at home alone. They're not put in homes for old people and forgotten. No, they're a part of the family till they, they might pass away in a movie theater or at the restaurant with their family, because they're not, and they're also, they have their role where, people go to them, family members go to them and say, please give me guidance, show me the way, tell me what about your life experience, right? So I find that this family unit is such a powerful thing that we are slowly forgetting and pushing aside also.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with that. And going back to Japan, when we went there for a holiday, because I've traveled to many countries and I've always been guided. I don't know why I'm going there, but when I get there, then, I get the messages and so forth. But just before COVID, we went to Japan and I said to my partner, Brian, that you met, it's like, wow, I feel really at home here. It's really bizarre. And I said, if we were so happy and so content in France, we had no intentions of moving anywhere. But I said to him, if we ever move again, I'd love to go to Japan. Maybe we could live here. And we traveled a fair bit. And I just love the culture. And yes, they're very respectful. Even on those very fast bullet trains, they could be on their mobile, but like they block out everybody around them. And they speak quietly or don't speak on the trains because they're aware of people's private space. They want to be quiet. And just very kind and gentle. And their mannerisms, it was just wonderful. And when we arrived in Australia after, during COVID lockdown, because this is the second time I've lived in Australia, I said to Brian, oh my God, there must be a busload from India. And it turns out that now, at the moment, the Indian population in Australia is the highest expatriate community. After Australians living here, then it's Indian people. And I thought the best education for me has been living in different countries and not trying to change people, but just learning about their culture and learning why they do things and just observing. And yeah, it's been heart opening and mind changing, because it gets you out of your comfort zone. And a lot of women especially want to fix and save and help people, especially mothers, whereas we didn't come here to fix and save the world. We came here to have fun, and this is what going to different countries has taught me. You can't change what's out of your control, and it's no need worrying what's out of your control. Just trust in God or the universe, whatever you believe in, and your inner guidance, and trust that everything happens in divine timing for divine reason. So you talked about different ancient cultures, the West and the East. So at the moment, how can ancient wisdom help us in the West thrive in our modern, fast-paced world?
That's a very deep question. But before I tell you my opinion about that, I wanted to answer the question that you asked me before, and for which I told you this whole story. So basically, what in my view is happiness. It's this coherence between the heart and the mind, being able to follow your heart and not say, no, we can't do it, right? And in my experience, every time your heart wants something, it's there, even if it looks impossible, there will be a bridge built under your feet as you're proceeding. So the first step, there's that famous proverb, the first step is the most important one, right? Taking the decision to say, I'm going to do it differently, and I'm not going to say that it's easy, but once your heart and your brain are aligned, and your heart says, I want to do this, and your brain says, instead of saying, no, you can't do it, it says, let me see how I can help you achieve what you want. And it sets to work. That's when your heart, actually, if you look at I'm a scientist, at heart. So I want to understand the real, physics, chemistry, biology behind everything. So actually, if you look at the heart, it is not just a muscle pumping blood in the system. It also is an endocrine gland, and it can overrule decisions made by the brain. So if the brain decides something and the heart says, no, this is not okay, then it is going to cancel the order. So once the heart becomes the master, then the brain follows, and the brain has the intelligence, it has the capacity, it has everything. So that's when you start feeling, and again, this is my pure experience, feeling happy, saying, hey, this is what I wanted. Yesterday I wanted tacos, and look, today I'm eating tacos. So one target achieved, isn't it? So I thought, that's when my life actually changed. And each country gave me something, I got, I'm a very chaotic, let's say, person. I was hyperactive as a child, nobody could control me. My parents were so tired of me. I cannot tell you how many nannies I went through and everything. And at some point in time, I thought meditation would help me focus my mind, because if I go through life with the, stepping on the gas to the bottom, is, it's going to burn out really fast, whatever life I have in me. So I thought, let me slow down. And that brought me to meditation. And meditation was the start of taking the time and observing what is inside. And I think this is the first step and the bridge to how we can make our society better. You cannot look in the mirror and say, I'm going to make this society better by going in the street and with a pancart and saying, I am against this government. I want this person, um, that is not a way. I don't want to use words like, nonviolence, etc. But I think everything starts with first understanding who you are, knowing who you are, your pluses and your minuses. And then the second thing is by going out of your comfort zone in order to change yourself, to improve yourself, and to make, and if you listen to yourself, if you take, a few minutes a day to just sit, you don't have to sit on a cushion or cross-legged, just be mindful. That's when you have a very real and meaningful conversation with yourself. You ask your heart, what do you want? What makes you happy? The most difficult question in my life was that I had to answer is what makes me happy? And that was the start of my journey. And then again, things that I did. I had different experiences. People look at my CV and they say, oh, you've been in corporate, you've been in academia, you've been, in the diplomatic world, you've been in education, you've been in medical, you've been in this. I just needed to experience things to understand what is my way and what can I take from that so I can slowly put them together like pieces of puzzle. And I'll give you an example. When I started doing yoga, and my body started becoming more flexible. And I first saw my feet. I had a close look at my feet. And I thought, look at these, size 36 little feet, right? They've carried me all over the world. They've done crazy things. Look at my body, the damage I did to it when I was a teenager, with nights I didn't sleep and dancing in bars and alcohol. And, I don't want to say that I was, a perfect person. But then you get so much love for your body, for yourself, I felt this wave of, wow, like I'm grateful. I'm grateful to you, my body. I'm grateful to you, my mind. I'm grateful to the teacher inside. And I'm grateful to you, Beverley. We are one. And exactly. Then, like when you look, I remember you hosted Nassim Haramein and it changed my life. In Monaco, remember?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I felt like somebody opened the door and, gave me access to the wealth of the world. It was amazing. We are, there is this, in quantum physics, this non-separation between observer and object of observation. The particle behaves as a particle or as a wave, depending on whether somebody is observing it or not. So how can I be different from you or anybody or anything else that I observe? Right? This entanglement, amazing entanglement, which, holds us together. And we don't know. We're so, right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned a sim because it's like the same when the student's ready, the master appears. And yes, a lot of people had a big transformation at that event. And yeah, I'm just curious because you talked a lot about looking within. And you talked about meditation, which is a great way of changing our fast-paced mind, our busyness, and our world. When we look within, I think it's all about conscious awareness. So I'm interested in your view on what is consciousness.
I think there are different levels of consciousness. And what comes to mind is this amazing movie by Christopher Nolan, I think it's called Inception. And it's a very good map of how the mind works. There are different levels on which we operate, and I think at the very, very superficial level, we interact with each other and we are in this world, but at the deepest level, we are all connected. We're all one. Consciousness comes from one source, right?
Yeah.
In my Tibetan medicine studies, very, very, very is a very interesting story. I had different professors who were absolutely brilliant, and then I was looking forward to the astroscience class, and into our classroom walked this gentleman, short, pot belly, big teeth, overbite, didn't speak English, and we're all disappointed, thinking, "Oh, this is our astroscience, instructor, professor, right?" And
Yeah.
and then, like we watched him take a marker and go to the whiteboard and start explaining, how consciousness enters this reality, and how it enters the womb, and how it splits. One stream of consciousness splits into intelligent energies, which Ayurveda, Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, and all other medical systems, Unani, Siddha, etc. Talk about, and they all have their own personality, intelligence, properties, and everything. And it's like you're weaving a carpet, when a person is born, of course, depending on the macrocosm and the energies that are available when you're born, and considering forces of karma and everything, it's like you are a weaver making a carpet with these threads. There's red, there's yellow, there's red for fire, there's yellow for earth, there's white for air, there's blue for water, there's green for wood, and you have your own unique design. Okay, you weave this carpet while this carpet is woven actually while in your mother's womb, and at death, this carpet slowly, the energies disintegrate, right? Like they just slowly detach from this. It's like you're undoing the work that you've done weaving this carpet. You're unweaving. And I have seen it when my mom passed away in my arms, and I have seen the signs. She gave me the demonstration of what I had learned in my classes about dying, and what the process of dying implies. And I saw it all in front of my eyes, and she was just showing me, and she was fully conscious. She said, I was trying to play some music, some of her favorite music, and she got angry. She said, can't you see I'm dying, And it was like, it's a task, I am at it. So,
Wow.
I was in awe of this whole process, and I haven't yet experienced a birth, but I'm very interested in, seeing how, I watch all sorts of documentaries and doctors talking about the fetus and how it's formed, but that is the journey of life. And so you're given this mix of energies, right? In India, or in, not only India, but in Asia, astrologers come and say, this is your strength, and this is your weakness, and this is your area of development, and this is what you have to do. But now, what you have to do. Do you have the courage? Do you have the motivation? Do you have the strength to follow this path? Because it's not easy. And I sacrificed, for my journey, I sacrificed your conventional life. I could have, of course, I have adopted a child, and I'm the happiest mom ever, but I did not have a family. I did not have children of my own. I did not have the stability of a home, the financial, let's say, like I don't have a pension at the moment. And it's not a thing for the faint of heart, but I'm sure that this is going to, to be well at the end.
That's wonderful. And because you talked about women, many women go through crises, especially in midlife. They reinvent themselves. So what best advice can you give to women listening to help them navigate and make change with confidence and resilience?
I would give this advice to everybody, not only to women. I would say the biggest demon that we face is our fear. And this is the most arduous battle that we have at all times, being able to go out of a comfort zone. There is a very short story. There are two things that I would like to share with viewers. One is a story about, it's called The Buddha and the Beggar. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's about a beggar boy in Thailand who keeps begging, and he's trying to accumulate, some sort of wealth, right? And every night there is a mouse that comes and takes away everything he has saved, his food, his grain, and he catches the mice and says, why are you stealing from me? You can go and steal from rich people. And the mouse says, it's in your destiny that you can only own, very little. And he said, why, And the mouse said, I don't know, just go ask the Buddha. So the boy starts and on his journey, and he arrives one night, at a house, and the owners of the house are kind enough, he asks for a place to sleep, and they give him a place to sleep. And then they ask him in the morning, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to see the Buddha to ask him why this is my destiny. And the parents say, oh, if you do meet the Buddha, ask him, tell him we have a 16-year-old daughter who doesn't speak. And she, we are trying to find a way. What do we have to do to make her speak? And the boy agrees and continues. And then he comes to this great mountain, and he doesn't know how to cross it. He starts on his journey, and suddenly this wizard appears with a stick, with that magic wand, whatever.
Staff.
The staff, yes, thank you. And he asks him, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to meet the Buddha, blah, blah. And the wizard says, I've been trying to achieve enlightenment for 500 years. And I don't know why, according to my calculation thing I've done, I should have been able to achieve enlightenment by now. Can you ask him what to do? And the boy says, yes. And so wizard helps him cross the mountain. He comes to this huge lake, and he has to swim across it. So while he's swimming, he's getting tired, and this giant turtle comes and gives him a ride on her back, and of course asks him, where are you going? And then she says, can you ask the Buddha, I have been trying to become a dragon for so many years, for 1,000 years, and I can't. What's stopping me, from becoming that? And so the boy goes and, he meets the Buddha, but the Buddha says, we can only ask 3 questions. Like, I can only answer 3 questions. And the boy sits and he thinks, I've traveled all this way to ask this question, but, which question is more important? The girl who cannot speak, the wizard who's been, 500 years at this, and the turtle who's been, trying to become a dragon. And so he gives up his question, and he asks the 3. And then on his way back, he meets the turtle, and he tells to the turtle, he said, the Buddha said, you have to go out of your shell to become a dragon. You cannot become a dragon in a shell. And the turtle says, okay, that makes sense. Goes out, and in the shell, there is, a fortune of treasure from the bottom of the ocean, gold and pearls and everything. And she says, I don't need this anymore. I've been sitting on it. So here, you can have it and use it. And then he continues and he meets the wizard, and he tells the wizard, the Buddha said, you should let go of your staff of power so you can fly to the sky. And so the wizard says, makes sense, and gives him the staff of power. And then finally he reaches at the girl's house, and he tells the parents, the girl will only speak when her soulmate arrives in her life. And at this point in time, the girl is at the top of the stairs asking her parents, is that young man who was here 2 months ago in the house? So this is such a beautiful story, you can get what you want. You can get your power, you can get your wealth, you can get your soulmate by walking this path.
Yeah, wow, that's an incredible story that we can all relate to in our own life and, look within. And how can we achieve it? Like you mentioned earlier, you don't look for problems, you find the solution, you go within, and very powerful. And I can see the beautiful flowers around you. And I know nature plays a big role in your life. So, for the listeners, why is reconnecting with nature so important for healing?
I think nature is where we come from. We are born from nature. Nature is consciousness, another form of consciousness. We were never meant to make foods in a plant. We were never meant to take medicine that was, created in a lab. We were never meant to, add unnatural processes to our lives. We are nature, and we were never separated, never will be. Therefore, returning to nature is where we find ourselves. This is, at least, this is where my center is. And also, it's something very interesting. I have noticed that, especially women, we, I have this flower and I feed it, I give it water, I look after animals, after gardens, I think, how can I give life? And we women are a vehicle for life to come into this world, right? And it is it's an incredible power. No man can ever match it. I'm not saying anything bad about men. They have their own their own journeys and their own skills. But woman is nature. We are Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a woman. And once you recognize that in you, and the fact that I can give life with these hands is something that I think most of us, do not realize.
Yes, that's, I believe we are the soil, because I'm living on the land and truly connecting with Mother Earth. And that's a wonderful way you put it, that we are nature. And as this is a wellness show, what is your number one wellness go-to?
I would say nature again. So I've spent a lot of time trying to understand, trying to walk, for example, in India, walk the Himalayas with people who know plants, with my professors and everything. And the way that, that medicine was created before the advent of modern medicine is like, using minerals, using plant, using, for example, for plants that are cooling, for medicines that are cooling, they are exposed to full moon nights, to the light of the moon, so if the moon doesn't shine, if it's a full moon night, but it's a cloudy sky, they will wait till the next month, to expose this material to the medicine. So it's as above, so below. You cannot put a layer of, chemicals in between that. And I think this is something that we should always consider, if we I'm not saying plant our own food, because not everybody lives in the countryside, but if we're careful about what goes into our system, not only in terms of food, but also in terms of information, we eat with our eyes, in terms of relationships, in terms of environment, then we will not need medicines and doctors. So mindfulness is such an important aspect, and putting our health first and being grateful to our bodies for, carrying us around, for being our vehicle, and giving it what it needs, giving it sport, giving it fresh air, giving it, clean water, and good friendships and views of green and beautiful flowers.
Yes, I totally agree. And if you could change just one thing in the world to create a healthier, happier humanity, what would that be?
I would change my mind. And if you don't mind, I have this little story, which actually I still carry with me. I've heard long time ago about Tibetan Buddhist center, which had a lama, and usually the Tibetan lamas are, I'm not saying for everybody, but usually they're not very tall and they eat well, they're quite happy. And so this gentleman is on the top floor of this center in Sydney, Australia. And an elderly lady goes up the stairs with a tray with biscuits and tea to serve him with amazing intentions, right? And halfway up the stairs, she somehow trips and goes all the way down to the bottom of the stair with the tea, with the biscuits, the hot tea and everything. And she's just lying motionless, right, on the floor.
Yeah.
And everybody from the center, comes, around her, and they're just, of course, worried and trying to understand what happened. And then the lama comes to the top of the stairs and he just claps his hands and he's happy. And everybody says, like, explain, right? What is so happy in this woman falling? Maybe she broke her legs, we don't know. And he says, it's wonderful that she didn't die.
Oh, bless.
So,
yeah.
So, isn't it, right? Like, if we can change our minds instead of, we are conditioned every day through TV, media, etc., to see only the horrible things. I've just watched 5 minutes of TV the other day. Somebody was stabbed in the neck. I don't know. Immigrants are doing this in, the UK. There's so much violence, hatred against people who have been displaced, right?
Yeah.
They did not leave their countries for nothing. I am also an immigrant, Canadians, Americans, nobody's native to the land, right? So why so much fear mongering and hatred mongering? Why not see the beauty?
Exactly. This is the way I personally believe women are going to change the world. One, by educating their children, and two, to come together in beautiful gatherings and love and support each other, and find, as you keep saying, find that love within you, find that love and peace. It's like what Dr. Wayne Dyer said years ago: when you change the way you look at something, the way that something is changes. You have to be the change you want the world to be. And and I know, because you invited me to be part of it, you've recently started a wonderful women support group. Can you let us know how that came about?
Sure. And thank you so much, Beverley. I cannot say also, I have to say, before I talk about myself more, about the work that you're doing, and you should have a podcast and broadcast, the good things you have been doing, creating communities and inviting me and seeing the, the beauty and the wisdom in other people. I think that's really amazing. Yeah. So this group is also because, we live and we have interactions with people, and then, you realize that when somebody needs help, it's the, some lama was telling me, if it's early in the morning and you're doing your mantra and somebody knocks on your door and says, can you help me? And you say, no, go away, I'm praying, right? So the best form of spirituality, of religion, is being close to your fellow human, and doing it without expecting, some payment or, some reward or something, just doing it because this is how it should be. And so, this is, again, one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to you, for for not promoting yourself, so many people doing that nowadays, especially since the advent of social media, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's lovely to have women to come together and just simply be, and be in a safe environment where they can speak the truth from their heart. Because last night in the group, as you know, we discussed how many domestic violence has risen globally, and there's a lot of deaths. And so I think now more than ever, women need to support each other and know that they can speak their mind, as I said.
So basically, I was saying that if I look back on my life, like I said, I think it's very, very important to, to conquer fear, to be true to ourselves, and to support each other. I think that is, these are the prerequisites for success, and being open to learning, not being frozen in our ideas. I learned from Japan that there is no right thing, the way I do things. And this also happens in relationships so often, this is the way I learned to do dishes in my family. And, maybe my friend or my husband or somebody, does things differently. And why not, accept, that things can be done differently and the result will be the same, right?
Yeah, totally agree. And it is about acceptance, because with acceptance comes peace. So as we come to a close, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yes. Basically, a little bit about what I do. So I'm a psychologist, and I do a lot of I have realized that it's a mistake to try to separate the body from the mind and treat each other individually. It's a two-way street, If you have stress, you get gastritis, if you eat spicy food or alcohol, like it's going to influence your mood. So I try to look at everything from a holistic perspective. I'm not blaming it on doctors. They do an excellent job. They have usually about 5 minutes to treat a patient. I give 90 minutes for online consultations. The way I operate is by sending out a form and trying to understand family history, because 3 generations are recorded in the genes and active in our biology. I'm trying to understand diet, lifestyle, and sometimes just correcting a small thing can lead to a very big result. For example, people who come to me for anxiety and insomnia, and I look at their chart and they tell me they drink, regular coffee, right? And we just try to take that out of the diet for a week. And then people come and say, wow, that's a miracle, I have peaceful sleep in 1 week. So diet and lifestyle are fundamental for your mental well-being and for your high energy levels, and also the wear and tear of your body. So understanding that no body is the same, that there are not only giraffes in the jungle, that there are elephants and tigers and gazelles, and they need different diets and they have different skills, right? Like you can't ask an elephant to climb a tree, but the monkey will be very good at it. So finding out which animal you are, what diet is good for you, which lifestyle changes can you do, these are things that will not cost money. Solutions are very simple. All you need to do is to, make the first step forward, and I can just hold your hand. And I do it with a lot of love and dedication. So it's a blend. What I do practice is a blend of psychology and wellness from the point of view of the traditional medical systems. And it's not only Ayurveda, like my company Ayurveda in Fethiye proclaims, but it's also the wisdom of China, Tibet, and all the other medical systems that are recognized in India, and a part of the Ministry of Ayush, which is actually the go-to in India if you have chronic health problems. But if you do break a bone, or if you have acute, God forbid you've been in an accident, don't go to a traditional medical doctor. Go to the hospital, get your x-rays, your blood tests, and, talk to a doctor, and then come to us and we'll give you our point of view and maybe a more natural approach, a more even cost-effective approach.
That's wonderful because, yes, I believe everything has its place, and you're a definite perfect example of mixing traditional, conventional Western medicine with your psychology, with the Eastern medicines. And so you've traveled extensively, and from your experience of life, what would you say is one superpower that we all have within us that maybe we don't already know?
Again, I think there is one superpower that's common to all people, and that is having emotion. I know it's been, it's always been criticized, and there are societies that believe being an emotional person is not a good thing, but a strong emotion kept well under reins can take us it's like a very powerful horse with a good powerful rider on it, and women have that emotional side. We have plenty of it. So I think just overcoming our fear, understanding who we are. Am I, again, to go back to Ayurveda, am I a monkey? Am I a giraffe? Am I an elephant? Therefore, what are my weaknesses and what are my strengths? And if this is my weakness, what am I doing every day to go out of my comfort zone? Say, if I'm an elephant, in my case, I am perfect in meditation. My mom said when you were a child, we would put you somewhere and then we would find you with a book, in the same place 5 hours later, right? So I have to push myself and go to yoga and Pilates and go for a walk, So what are you doing towards that? So first step is, understand who you are. Yeah, go out of your comfort zone. Have no fear. Support will come. And it's not, people believe in the concrete world, I can touch this, but think, where does internet come from? How does a phone work? Try to understand the hidden mechanisms of how the world, this universe works, the natural rules, what is gravity? What is, attraction? What is the laws of electromagnetism and quantum physics and quantum mechanics, right? Just take a few minutes a day and try to understand. And also have your circle of friends.
Wonderful. Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to thank you for giving up your precious time and sharing your wonderful words of wisdom. And I will share all your websites and all your social media links on the podcast so people can get in touch with you. And yes, take heed and find out which animal you are so that you can find your superpower and live the life that you're meant to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beverley, for making my message available to more people. I hope our work combined, our powers combined, and our skills, special skills combined, can cover the world with a blanket of goodness. I thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.